Emmett was born the 25th of July, 1941. And it was a very difficult birth. He was a breech baby, and they had to get him turned around and so forth and so on, which caused a whole lot of misery and pain. He was the happiest baby in the world. It looked like he said, "Free at last, I'm here, I'm free." And nothing fazed him. By that I mean you didn't have to hold him and rock him and pet him. If you gave him that bottle or made sure he was dry, you could put him in his bed and he would lie there and kick and coo and for hours. As he grew up, it was more like we were sisters and brothers almost, because my mother raised him while I went to work. So it was like he was hers and I knew I was hers, and we had fun together. We laughed together. We never did much fighting until he and I moved alone, and it would become necessary to discipline him ever so often.
I don't know if prankster will be the right term or not, but I'll just give you an example of his fun-loving ways. Once we were in Chicago with him, and we were walking down 63rd Street in St. Lawrence, and he yelled out, "Here are my two big cousins from the suburbs. Nobody can beat them up." So we grabbed him up and shut him up right quick. So that was fun to him, but it wasn't so funny to us at the time.
Emmett was mischievous. He liked to play, and he had no sense of danger. Everything was funny to him. And he shot some firecrackers within the city limit, which was a no-no. He didn't do things like that, but to him, that was funny.
He was a very nice, intelligent young man. I call him a young man because he was at that age, you know. He was very intelligent, he was sweet, and he was lovely.
He was very good in art, and he was very good in science. I don't know, he seemed to unravel that science like nobody's business. He was very good in spelling, too.
The life for African Americans in the South during Jim Crow was as close to a repressive regime as you could imagine. Blacks could not eat at public restaurants, couldn't rent hotel rooms, literally had to ride in the back of buses or public transportation.
We couldn't get a drink of water because how thirsty we were. Unless we found that colored water fountain, we couldn't get a drink of water out of a fountain. Our school term was from 4 to 6 months a year, and we had no busing. There were no buses that bused us to school. We had to walk to school 3, 4, 5 miles, whatever, distance we lived from the school.
African Americans were forced to live in certain communities, and they had to develop within that community. And there was not much difference between segregation in the South and apartheid in South Africa.
Life for blacks was one of seclusion and of being in every way, shape, and form treated as less than human, less than equal.
Blacks in those days, it was against the law to say yes and no to white folks. And if it didn't, then you could be beaten and even killed for saying yeah and not calling him by his name.
African Americans had no protection from the law because in most cases they could not vote. And if you cannot vote for the sheriff or the police officers or the mayor, then they do not have to loan any type of assistance to you. And therefore, African Americans lived in this constant fear of something happening to them and they're not being able to react.
My brother was beaten almost to death in Jackson because he went to Walgreens and sat down to have a sundae or whatever he ordered. They beat him almost unmercifully right here in Jackson. I guess I can't really describe how impoverished it was. No matter how wealthy you were as black, there weren't many wealthy people anyway, But those who had a little money, they were no different. You're just another nigger.
My grandfather came to Chicago in 1955 to a funeral, and my mother and them allowed me to go back with him for vacation. And so Emmett found out and he wanted to go. There were some questions of whether he should go or not, but they finally let him go.
Oh, that day will live in infamy, so far as I'm concerned. I got up that morning, and for some reason we couldn't get out of that house. We were supposed to meet Moses down at 12th Street Station. We could hear the whistle blowing as we got to the steps. He tore up the steps. I said, wait a minute. I said, you didn't kiss me goodbye. Where are you going? How do I know I'll ever see you again? And he said, oh, Mama, he really scolded me. And I wondered why I said a dumb thing like that. But he turned around, came back, he gave me the kiss, and then he gave me his watch. He said, here, take this watch. I won't need it where I'm going. And I said, okay, I'll wear it. And I put it on. And I said, what about your ring? Because I'd given him his daddy's ring. First time. He said, well, I'm going to show this off to the fellows.
They always kind of prep you for going to Mississippi, made you very aware of what could happen and what the South was like. And so I was very much aware of what could happen while we were in Mississippi. And I don't know if Emmett was told or not.
That summer when Emmett and Wheeler arrived, it was the beginning of the cotton harvest time. During the day, we would pick cotton all day.
I wasn't old enough really to pick cotton, and Emmett wasn't either. So we just played around in the field most of the time.
We picked cotton all day. After the weighing up, well, after we finished picking the cotton, we had our supper. Then we decided to go to the little country store. From the country store, we went up to Money. That's where we met other boys, and the checker game was going on.
When we got to the store in Money, Bryant's store, I went in and I don't know what I purchased, but I spent some money. And as I was in the store spending my money, Emmett Till came in. So I left out and left him in the store.
When he came out, that's when they sent me in to make sure that he didn't say anything out of line. Now, what he said inside the store, I don't know before I got there.
He asked for 10 cents to get 10 cents worth of bubble gum. He put the money into her hand. Just like that. And she jerked her hand back. So that was it.
He and I left the store together. We didn't have any conversation with Mrs. Bryant. We left together. She came out of the store and went to her car, which was parked on the north side of the store. And as she was going to her car, that's when Emmett whistled at her, the famous wolf whistle.
Yes, he whistled at Carolyn Bryant when she came out of the store.
No one knew that he was going to whistle. And when he whistled, it scared everybody in the bunch. And when he saw our reaction, he got scared.
Miss Bryant came out and she was going to her car and someone said that she was going for a gun.
We all panicked, including Emmett. We jumped in the car, and when we got in the car just wasn't moving fast enough.
And we sped down the gravel road and we looked behind us and there's a car behind us. So we thinking that they're after us. So we pick up some speed, pull to the side of the road and jump out of the car. And we ran down through the cotton field. And as we ran through the cotton field, the cotton bolls were kind of green, they were hitting our legs and some of us fell over each other and the car went right on by. So we said, well, nothing's to that. And Emmett Till begged us not to tell our grandfather what happened, and we didn't.
Our neighbor, Ruther May Crawford, she told us that we was going to hear some more about that. And I didn't think nothing of it because I'd never heard of anything like that before.
3 days had gone by, and this girl told us, Ruth told us, hey, you guys are going to hear some more about this.
We had heard this colored man said that they was going to get him. That's how we knew to go back to tell Mo was right. To take the boys to Grenada to the train station, put them on the train. He didn't do it. So
actually we forgot about it. We were 16, 12, 13, 14, 16 years old. So we went to Greenwood.
We all said, well, we going to town. We had picked some cotton and made some change, and my older brother said, well, I'm gonna take y'all to Greenwood.
I carried them all to Greenwood, bought them a little wine, around 12 or 12:30, I brought them back out.
Then about 2:30 in the morning, thereabout, I could hear people outside talking, and they talking about Emmett, and they talking about the boy from Chicago. They didn't say Emmett. They said there's a fat boy from Chicago, and they told my grandfather they wanted to talk to him. I looked out the windows just like daylight, and I said, my Lord, I said, look at the cars. But I didn't know where they was going. So at the time, I could see this black man get out of the car, went to the back, and the white went to the front.
This is Mose Wright. I am the uncle of Emmett Louis Till. Sunday morning, about 2:30, someone called at the door. And I said, who is it? And he said, this is Mr. Brian. I want to talk with you and the boy. And when I opened the door, there was a man standing with a pistol in one hand and a flashlight in the other hand. And he asked me, did I have two boys there from Chicago? I told him I have. And he said, I want the boy that done all that talk. So they came to my room first, and they had a pistol in one hand, a flashlight in the other, and they looked on me and Maurice, who's in bed with me, and they recognized that Maurice or myself, we weren't the one that they were looking for. So they passed on through the house to the third room where Emmett was in the bed with Simi. So we marched on around through two rooms, and I found the boy in the third room in the bed with my baby boy.
I hear this noise in the bedroom, and I look up and I see this Roy Bryant. I knew him. And I saw the other tall, bald-headed man. They was hollering and fussing. They told me to lay back down and go to sleep. But I kept my eyes open and saw what was going on, that they was going to take Emmett. And at that point, I didn't know where they was going to take him. I said, well, maybe they're going to take him home. They aroused him out of the bed, and I don't think he really knew what was going on. So he was answering their question, but he wasn't saying yes, sir, and no, sir. So they became irate about that. And they started cursing and swearing. And I think he wanted to put on his socks or something with his shoes. And it was a terrifying experience. He had no idea what was going on, really. Yeah, had no idea the kind of people that he was dealing with, he was faced with. He had no way of conceiving what the South was like, no kind of way. In the room, my mom, she offered them money not to take the boy, and that's when Roy kind of hesitated. But Marlon wouldn't have nothing of it. He had made up his mind. He was the one with the gun. He had a .45 in his hand, and he was calling the shots. And he claimed that he was just going to take him up the road and just whip him and turn him loose. That's what he said he was going to do. They were telling my grandfather if he's not the one, they was going to bring him back. And they left. And after they left, nobody said anything to anybody.
And they marched him to the car, and they asked someone there, was this is the right boy? And the answer was, here. And they drove toward money. After they left, Mama was very upset.
And Daddy was walking around, all he could say is, he was saying, That's all he could say.
I do know that you don't whistle at a white woman in Mississippi. And I was praying that they didn't kill him. I wasn't going to kill him, just maybe torture him a little bit and bring a kid back to his grandfather.
When I'm laying there in the bed, waiting for them to bring him back. Every car that I would hear coming down the road, I thought it was them bringing him back. But then when it began to get turned towards dawn, I knew they weren't going to bring him back.
I know one thing, he was sad. That was the saddest day I ever seen in my life. Ooh, Lord, that was sad. I felt for Bobo, Mama. I really did. Everybody down that road cried.
Mose Wright knocked on the door and said they'd taken my boy. Well, I told him we could go and look for him. We went up to Munnings and we come back. And then Mose told me, ain't nothing else we could do. Just sit and wait.
I was sound asleep at 9:30. And I guess I slept about a couple hours. And it was Willie Mae telling me that those men had come and taken Bo away from my uncle's house, her father's house.
As I was walking, I saw a green 1955 Chevrolet truck. And I saw, which there was 5 people. There was really 5 people. And there was 2 Ted Collins, Herbert, and I'm sure it was EMMETT, and the Marlon and Bryant, they was in the cab of this truck. And so as I go up, before I could get to the barn, I could hear this beating, and I could hear this crying, I could hear this beating, I could hear this crying. So I kept walking. Then I had to go up and see, walked up and told Miss Mandy about it. I said, Miss Mandy, I said, they beating somebody in that barn. So she said, I'll tell you one thing what we do. So let's walk back up that way. So me and Miss Mandy, which we did, we came back up there. And there was a well there, and I turned the well on, and I'm going to get me some water. At that time, I could look. I can see J.W. Marlon came up. He had a green shirt on, khaki pants, and a 45 on his side. So he asked me, did you hear anything? I said, did you hear anything? I said, no. I said, I didn't hear anything. A human being just being beat by white folks like this here, by beaten by this, Even maybe some of the black brothers could have been in there, because I know I saw them on the truck, but I didn't see them at all after they got in that barn. The only thing I saw was that truck. Could have been them. And just by going, listen to it, it's something, it's really something. It hurts you. You don't forget. These things I will never forget.
The night of EMMETT murder, which we didn't know he had been murdered that night, in the middle of the night, my sister and I was lying up in the window trying to get some air, and we saw this fire in a barrel in back of J.W.'s house. And we woke our parents up. And my father walked out the back door and stood on the porch and he came back in and said there was a fire at J.W. Marlon house in the barrel. They was burning something up.
The sheriff came and told me they had found the body at Phillip and wanted me to go and identify the body, which I did. And we found the body with Didn't have on any clothes at all. The boiler was so badly damaged that we couldn't hardly just tell who he was. But he happened to have on a ring with his initials, and that cleared it up.
I was at home, and Mo Wright called me and said they done found the body. And I want to go down there, then identify his body. And I carried him down there. And when I carried him down there, the smell was so bad till I got about 5 or 6 feet from the body. And Mo Wright went up there and pulled his ring off and said, "That's him." And then Mo Wright said his tongue been cut and pushed back in his mouth, and his private had been cut off.
When I heard that Emmett had been found and had been murdered, everybody just fell to pieces.
Well, there was shock, sadness, anger, and almost unbelief, you know. But it was a strange feeling. Strange feeling.
To me, it's like he never died. I never had any sorrow or remorse because I always thought inside that I would see him again. I don't know if I was in a state of shock or what, but when I heard they found his body, it's like, find whose body? He's not dead. I went to the funeral, same thing, you know.
I found out about it 9:30 Sunday morning. I was in bed. I got up, called my mother when I got the news, because every decision I had ever made or every crack that I had ever been in, it took her to get me out of it. And I took that one to Mama too, because I didn't know what to do. Mother told me to come right over and she would start making calls. And I got over there as quickly as I could make it. And that wasn't very long.
By now, everybody is they're screaming, they're falling out. And I ran over to try to help my mother. And I felt such a vibration coming from her to me until I jumped back, because it seemed that I was going to take her life away from her. It seemed that her life was draining into me, and I could feel myself building up, getting strong enough to carry on. Sheriff Strider wanted an immediate burial because he knew that it wouldn't be good for the state of Mississippi for people to see what had happened to Emmett Till. And the only way you could stop people from seeing was to bury it. I mean, get it out of sight. I don't know what authority he had to bury my son, but he took that authority.
We was told to meet at the church. We're going to have a funeral today. We're going to bury the body. We all went to the church that day. The grave was dug. The body was there in a pine box. It had an awful stench to it. And we was getting ready to put the body in the ground when we got word to stop the burial.
Oh my God. Number one, when I first saw that box, I just collapsed. That box seemed to me to be as bigger than anything I'd ever seen before. But that was just the beginning. The size of the box was really the easy part. When I discovered that the box could not be opened, then I wondered, what on earth in the world is going on? You mean to tell me that I have spent all of this money to get a body that I can't even look at? How do I know what's in the box? I said, Mr. Rayner, do you have a hammer? He said, what do you mean? He said, yes, I have a hammer. I said, I mean, if you can't open the box, I can. And I'm going in the box. All right. He said, Miss Bradley, if you're that determined, I want you to go home and relax. He said, I'll go in the box and I will call you when I take the body out of the box. And when I was satisfied with that. I had to see, though, what was in there. And when I got back when he called me and I came back to the funeral home, about 3 blocks away, an odor met me that nearly knocked me out. I said, what on earth in the world is that? It was Emmett's body. That's how the smell was so strong until it covered a 2 or 3 block area. My father was on one side of me, and Rayfield Moody was on the other side of me, and Jean was at my back. And I shrugged them. I said, turn me loose. I've got a job to do, and I don't have time to be fainting now. I saw his tongue had been choked out, and it was lying down on his chin. I saw that this eye was out, and it was lying about midway the cheek. I looked at this eye, and it was gone. I looked at the bridge of his nose, and it looked like someone had taken a meat chopper and chopped it. And I looked at his teeth, because I took so much pride in his teeth. His teeth were the prettiest things I'd ever seen in my life, I thought. And I only saw 2. Where are the rest of them? They'd just been knocked out. And I was looking at his ears. His ears were like mine. They curled, they're not attached, and they curled up the same way mine are. And I didn't see the ear. Where's the ear? And that's when I discovered a hole about here, and I could see daylight on the other side. I said, now, was it necessary to shoot him? If that's a bullet hole, was that necessary? And I also discovered that they had taken an axe and they had gone straight down across his head, and the face and the back of the head were separate. Well, I looked at Mr. Rayner, and Mr. Rayner wanted to know, was I going to have the casket opened? I said, oh yes, we're going to open the casket. He said, well, Miss Bradley, do you want me to do something for the face? Want me to try to fix it up? I said, no, let the people see what I've seen. I said, I want the world to see this, because there's no way I could tell this story and give them the visual picture of what my son looked like.
The easiest thing would have been to say, no, close the casket, I can't bear it. But she somewhere found the strength to say, I'll bear my pain, to save some other mother from having to go through this. And because she put the picture of this young man's body on the conscience of America, she might have saved thousands of young black men and young black women's lives.
I believe that the whole United States is mourning with me. And if the death of my son can mean something to the other unfortunate people all over the world, then for him to have died a hero would mean more to me than for him just to have died.
Trying to get into the church to have the funeral was nearly mission impossible. I had to address the crowd on the way in and assure them that they would be able to hear the funeral services, and when we had finished, we would leave and the church would be open for them to continue to view the body.
I went to the funeral, I saw the body of Emmett, and it's like it wasn't him, you know. I can't explain it. It was like, this is not Emmett, you know. So I didn't feel any sorrow, you know, because inside I'm gonna see him again, you know. That's the way I felt. That's not Emmett.
People sort of can deal with things they don't have to look at, but it's hard to view a corpse and turn your head. And it was like in your face, you're gonna deal with this time. And that's why Generations Unborn owe Miss Mobley a lot, because she was able to graphically bring home what 1,000 speeches couldn't bring home. She made America deal with its ugly racial problem.
We are doing all we can do to investigate the Till murder. We have made a complete investigation and plan to go as far as possible in the prosecution of the case. I may add that we have had the full cooperation of all the white and colored citizens of Lafleur County.
It's my opinion that the guilt begins with Mrs. Bryant, and I want to see Mrs. Bryant punished, her husband, and any other persons that were in on this thing. And I feel like the pressure should start from the President of the United States and be channeled all the way down to the township of Money, Mississippi. And I'm certainly of the opinion that inasmuch as my son had to die, that I don't want his death to be a vain thing. If it can further the cause of freedom, then I will say that he died a hero.
To the President of the United States, Mr. Dwight D. Eisenhower, White House, Washington, D.C. Honorable Sir, we, the undersigned women and mothers and members of District 1, UPWACIO, call upon you, President of the United States, and your Congress to enact federal anti-lynch and anti-poll tax legislation immediately. The brutal lynching of Emmett Till one of the most barbaric atrocities committed against a child in the history of mankind, demands prompt federal intervention for the prosecution of all persons responsible for this heinous crime. We strongly urge you, Mr. President, to call a special session of Congress in order to recommend immediate passage of federal anti-lynch and anti-poll tax laws. Only in this way can we be assured that other Negro Americans will not meet a similar death. Responsibility for federal safeguards against lynching rests with the President and his Congress. The lynching of Emmett Till demands immediate recognition of that responsibility.
The headlines began to appear that Emmett Till's mother would attend the trial. And when that message made headlines, people began to send me mail by the bushel. Dirty pictures, pictures of male organs on the newspaper that they were sending me. And sometimes it was very difficult to read the article. And then they would write different stuff on top of the print, such as bombing my house and Mayor Daley's house if I attended that trial. And my son got just what he deserved. And there was another nigger gone.
This is Mrs. Alma Spearman, the grandmother of Emmett Till. Have you had any letters, telephone calls, things like that?
A number of letters and many telephone calls.
What do they say?
Well, they threaten us with the words of like niggers and savage or uncivilized people, or people that want to be ornery and want to press our charge, whether it be right or wrong. We've even been threatened that our house would be bombed.
I think this is one of the worst and the brutalest incident ever happened in Mississippi since I've been here. And the colored people is awful depressed over it.
It was because it was a boy that they went there. They had to prove that they were superior. They had to prove it by taking away a 14-year-old boy. You know, it's in the virus, it's in the blood of the Mississippian. He can't help it.
I'd like for the NAACP or any colored organization anywhere to know that we are here giving all parties a free trial and intend to give a fair and impartial trial. And we don't need the help of the NAACP, and we don't intend for them to help. We never have any trouble until some of our southern niggers go up north and the NAACP talks to them and they come back home.
There were little jars for people to drop money in stores, in the drugstore, and the dry cleaners, and commercial places in the town of Sumner for the defense of the two men accused of the murder. And I must say it was a strange, eerie feeling and very uncomfortable feeling to see these little jars of money being collected to defend two men who, it seemed, understood were the murderers.
What are the exact charges brought against Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam, Mr. Chatham?
The formal indictment is that they did willfully, unlawfully, feloniously, and of their malice aforethought, kill and murder Emmett Till, a human being.
Is there any other charge brought against these men, Mr. Smith?
Yes, charge of kidnapping.
Is there any further description of that charge?
No.
What possible penalty under the law is there in this kidnapping case? It could carry the death penalty just this.
Me and Mo Wright went to the trial. So when we got there, he went in, and I got about 10 feet from the door. So I see I couldn't get in, and I walked over to where Marlon and Brant was. And Brant said, "John, I didn't do it. Marlon done it." I said, "Well, somebody done it." He said, "Marlon done it, John. I didn't do it."
The atmosphere in the courtroom at that time, there was like a lot of talking and a lot of excitement. And people coming in and out, especially the day that Mamie showed up. That was everybody, the reporters were running and hollering that Mamie Bradley is here.
What do you intend to do here today?
To answer any questions that the attorneys might ask me to answer. To the
How
best.
do you think you could possibly be a help to them?
I don't know. I mean, just by answering whatever questions that they ask me.
I see. Do you have any evidence bearing on this case?
I do know that this is my son.
I remember the first day of the trial. Every window was filled with a father and his son or sons. And as I would come up the steps, they would aim the guns at me, and they would pull the triggers, and the little caps would pop, and they would say, "Bang, bang, bang." And the fathers, they thought this was the cutest thing. And the little guys were just firing away. Well, you know, the hair on my neck and down my back was just standing straight. It was a frightening experience.
The reporters who were there were shocked and kind of astonished at finding this situation in which it seemed that everybody, the people in the town, knew that these men had murdered this Negro boy. That, of course, was the term at the time. And at the same time, they did not want the murderers to be punished. I mean, that was the sort of the civic attitude. There was great hostility to the reporters who were, as the local people put it, making a big thing of this.
The highlight of the trial so far has been the dramatic testimony of Uncle Mose Wright. In court, he dramatically pointed at the two defendants, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milan, and said that they were the two men who came to his house on August the 28th and took the boy away. Old Mose said he never saw the boy alive again.
It may have been one of the most moving moments of the trial when Moses Wright stood as straight as an arrow and spoke clearly and firmly his testimony that indeed these were the men who had taken the boy from his house.
He stood up, he pointed his fingers at him, said, "That's him," which pointed at Milan. And that was, oh my, that was quite a moment then. Because you had the grabs, you had the people grumbling, and we later found out that blacks didn't do that in Mississippi.
He was willing to put himself at risk. He was not going to lie. He was not going to back down. He was not going to be intimidated. And you had to really admire the courage of somebody who, despite being brought up in that culture and the culture really of slavery, would defy the mores by insisting on telling the truth.
You got to remember now, back in those days, it was suicide almost for a black man, a black person, to go in a courtroom talking about testifying against a white man, because the whole court was white.
Ruby Hurley, Amzie Moore, and Medgar Evers at the trial. They came to the trial every day. Sometimes Amzie Moore and Medgar were out looking for witnesses, or Medgar was busy escorting Moses Wright to and from the courtroom safely because his life was being threatened every minute.
Medgar was the one who actually was on the scene and went to money and went to places trying to get information around. Now Ruby Hurley, this is not going to think nice from Ruby, because Ruby, like most of the big shot NAACP folks, they sat back in their outer offices in Atlanta and New York and did nothing but direct. But Amzie Moore joined Medgar and went and investigated, and they're the one who were taking all the chance of being killed themselves.
The defense attorneys have told us that the new state witnesses, whom they have also questioned, will talk about hearing groans from a shed. Is that correct?
Yes, they will. Will that definitely establish the time and the place of the actual crime?
It won't establish the time and place of the actual murder, but it will connect the defendants with the crime. Did any of these witnesses see the defendants at the scene of the shed? Yes, one of them.
When they called me to take the stand, and I took the stand, and then they asked me questions about about the one that did the murder, did the killing. Do you see do you see him in court? I said, yeah. Was it in here? I said, yeah. He said, would you go there and point him out? This is Marlon, and this is Brian. They were sitting right there.
What they did to me when I was on the stand was just unconscionable. They tried to make me confess that I had conspired with others to get double indemnity on Emmett's 5-cent and 10-cent policies. When Carolyn Bryant made her testimony, I was not in the courtroom. They had me in another room. They didn't want me influenced by the witness, I guess. But when I heard the story, I knew for two reasons that was a lie. Number one, Emmett's speech impediment under stress would not allow him to get these things out. And number two, the respect that I had put into him for womankind and for mankind, he just wouldn't come off that way. When I saw the antics that were going on in the courtroom, I could tell that everything was against us. And when the jury retired to render their verdict, I noticed that the black people who were lining the walls and the backs of the room, they were quietly leaving the courtroom. And I knew then that they knew we were not going to get a guilty verdict. And I said to my party, it's time for us to go. Congressman Diggs said to me, and miss the verdict? I said, this is one you don't want to hear. The verdict is not guilty. To satisfy me, they agreed to leave. And I guess about 45 minutes away from the courtroom, the verdict came in, not guilty.
How do you folks feel now that it's all over? Roy, how about you?
I'm just glad it's over with.
J.W.?
I am too.
Mrs. Bryant,
Feel fine.
how about you, Mrs. Milam? Did you expect this verdict?
Well, I was hoping for it.
Well, the whole trial was just a farce, but the verdict was the one that I had expected to be given.
Do you feel that all the witnesses were brought into the case?
No, 2 of the witnesses were being held in protective custody in Sheriff Strider's jail in Charleston.
My first reaction when I saw that they come in and said not guilty was unbelief, anger, revenge. And one of the reasons that I went back home was we had 2 guns. I just had the idea, hey, we could fight it out. My only problem was there was no gun for me. But I wanted revenge. I carried a chip on my shoulder for many years.
It was obvious that they had no trouble deciding that they were to let these men go free. And I later heard that, in fact, the reason it even took an hour, or whatever hour so it took, was that they simply were trying to be correct about the way they delivered their answer. But the answer was a foregone conclusion.
And then when they interviewed the foreman of the jury, he said it wouldn't have taken us that long, but they told us to make it look good. So we had some soda pop and beer and waited a little while, and then we came back with our verdict.
You never expect anything but for them to be acquitted, because that's Mississippi during that time.
When they acquitted Marlon and Bryant, it crushed my dad. He just couldn't take it anymore. He came home that day and said, "Boys, we got to leave. Can't stay here." Basically, we had no law back in '55 in relation to black and white killing each other.
Mr. Wright, the trial has been over for a week now. How do you feel about it after thinking it over?
I don't have any.
Were you surprised, or did you expect the verdict of acquittal?
I was thinking going just like it went.
You weren't surprised with the verdict?
It didn't surprise me.
When did you come to Chicago?
Monday night.
Why did you leave Mississippi, Mr. Wright?
Well, after Friday night, those men came to my house, but I just wasn't satisfied no more there. I just got willing and ready to leave, and I left this as quick as I could.
Men came to your house?
Friday night, 2.
What did they say?
Well, I've gone to bed, and I got restless through the night, and I got up and got in my car and went out to his church and stayed all night in the car. And a friend of mine told me that he was passing going home, said the car drove up in my yard and 2 white men was in it. And they got out with flashlights, just flashing all around the house, looking around the house. Of course, I didn't know anything about it, but I was just got restless through the night. And the next morning, I got up and went up to the house and just pulled of the crop a little I had there, and I just got in ready to leave right now. And I just
You go back for the kidnap trial.
So I'll go back to that. I promised the sheriff I'll be back, and so if I leave, I'm going back. But after then, I'm through with Mississippi forever and ever.
There are 2 kidnapping statutes in Mississippi. One carries a 10-year maximum in the state penitentiary. The other statute, which is patterned more or less after the federal Lindbergh statute, as we commonly refer to it, carries a maximum of death sentence. And the grand jury will be advised of the existence and of the terms of both statutes, and it will be their province to determine which, if either, of the statutes that they choose to indict on.
That me and Mr. Moore, right, we went there, we didn't see them at the kidnapping trial. We saw them at the regular trial, but not at the kidnapping trial. They wasn't even there. That's crazy. And that point, how long did it last? No more than 15, 20 minutes. What? We was out of there.
The LaFleur County, Mississippi grand jury at Greenwood adjourned just a short while ago and did not return an indictment in the Emmett Till kidnapping case. That's the only comment I'm authorized to make at this time.
You got him on kidnapping. You're looking at him. How can you say not guilty?
I'm Sidney Carlton of Sumner, Mississippi, one of the lawyers for J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant. Represented them in the murder trial recently in Sumner, Mississippi. I've just received information that the grand jury of Leflore County returned a no true bill against them with the charge of kidnapping of Emmett Till in Leflore County. Frankly, I think that this is a result primarily of the interference in Mississippi and Mississippi affairs by outside interests, and a result of the NAACP and their activities in trying to make something big out of just an ordinary criminal affair in Mississippi. After the trial some 5 or 6 weeks ago now, we are still receiving in the Daily Mail threatening letters from all over the United States saying that justice was not done, when no fair-minded jury in New York, Chicago, Detroit, San Francisco, anywhere else would have convicted these two men on this scanty evidence which was produced.
I know that Milam and Bryant had help when they murdered Emmett Till. Number one, they recruited a black boy, Leroy Too Tight Collins. He was seen on the truck restraining Emmett. That was the purpose of his being there. And I heard later that he told the two men that he was having difficulty restraining Emmett, and they stopped and picked up another guy.
At the time of Emmett Till's death, I was 13 years old. And me and my friends was walking down the streets, and we walked up and to the truck that Too Tight and Jimmy Lee was washing out. And I asked him what was the blood from, and he told me that it was from a deer they killed that night. But later on I found out that it was not a deer, it was Emmett Till's blood.
J.W. Milam told my father they went, picked Emmett Till up, and they was going to kind of like rough him up or beat him up a little bit and let him go. That was his story. But Roy and Kimball really beat him bad, and things just really got out of hand. That was his story, but we know better. And beat him up so bad till he asked Leroy Too Tight Collins and gave him the gun and told him to shoot him and get him out of his misery.
My name is Henry Law, and I was supposed to have been involved with Emmett Till murder, but I wasn't. And I still can't figure out why they would have me involved in that. And I knows nothing about it, no more what was told. This woman named Mary, she came up, she said, y'all heard about what happened last night? I said, no. And they said, yeah. I said, you know, J.W. and them went over to Mondays and killed a boy and put him in the river. Put him in, well, it wasn't a river, Black Bow. So I said, no, we ain't heard nothing about that. And so she said, said Too Tight said, that shoe laying down, I said, that's a shoe that boy had on. So they went to this boy's grandparents and asked about him. Said, Dad said, his granddad said, he's in there asleep. Said, what you want with him? Said, well, wake him up. We're going to get him out of there and take him and put him in the river down there. So he said, no. So no, white folks don't do that. Now, that's what they say, he said now. Said, don't do that. So I'll, if you let him stay here in the morning, I'll put him on a bus and send him back to Chicago. So no, they said, no, we want him out of here now. And said, I don't want to lie, I think they said that one of them hit the old man, the boy's granddaddy. said, I reckon he didn't want them to beat him up, either kill him. And they got him out of there. And so, well, they said that the boy was fighting him, but he couldn't whoop him all. That's what they said. Now, I'm putting that in the beginning that they said. Now, if I'd have been there looking at it, it'd have been a different story. So, but now, why, I still can't say it. Can't figure out why would they had me involved, and I know nothing about it.
I believe that if people are still alive and there's evidence to connect them in any way, shape, or form to the killing or to knowledge of the killing or the conspiracy of the killing, they should be prosecuted right now. I don't care how old they are. I don't care their medical condition. If they're alive and was part of it, they ought to be dealt with. There is no statute of limitation to murder. And people to say, well, it's years later, it doesn't matter. I think anyone that does this, if it's on their dying bed, they ought to die a convict and die condemned for participating in any way for what happened to Emmett Till.
There are some crimes that are known as higher than simply civil rights, human rights crimes. And the whole human community needs to look in and ensure that justice is done. The clock does not stop on this question of justice.
This is an injustice that continues as long as the murderers are at large and subject to being punished, but not being pursued.
If y'all could stop talking for 1 second. Please be quiet. Because I think that this family should get much more respect than what we gave them. This is history right before us, and I think Letitia James, the council member, did an excellent job to bring it before us. This is one time we need to give somebody a standing ovation. This family has been through a lot, and we should accord them that respect.
Emmett Till is emblematic of many such injustices that took place during that period and since. Down south and up south, Mississippi to New York, and to some extent what we're seeing still take place 50 years later. So it's very, very important that we not forget.
We need to bring this to the attention of the citizenry of the city of New York, and that all pressure be brought to bear to the Attorney General's office to get this case reopened.
All around America, they will follow this lead, and Ashcroft will hear that protest. This case will be reopened, and one day, Emmett will rest in peace because justice will have then been done. Justice will have been served. Thank you.
He whistled at a white woman and ended up dead at the bottom of a river. The 1955 lynching of Emmett Till was a key turning point in the civil rights movement. Now, nearly 50 years later, the Justice Department is reopening this case. A film called The Untold Story of Emmett Lewis Till helped renew interest in this case.
Now we'll go live to Washington, D.C. The Justice Department holding a news conference. They plan to reopen a murder investigation of a murder that is almost 50 years old and helped inspire part of the civil rights fight. Let's listen in.
I'm pleased to announce a federal-state partnership to investigate the murder of Emmett Till. Federal prosecutors and FBI agents today are being assigned to investigate the Emmett Till murder in partnership with the District Attorney's Office and local law enforcement. Their findings will serve as the basis for any possible prosecution. Emmett Till unwittingly played a pivotal role in launching the modern civil rights movement. We owe it to Emmett Till, we owe it to his mother and to his family, and we owe it to ourselves to see if after all these years, any additional measure of justice is still possible. Thank you.
Emmett was the catalyst that started the civil rights movement. Because when people saw what had happened to this little 14-year-old boy, they knew then that not only were men, black men, in danger, but black children as well. And it took something to stir people up and let them know that we're either going to stand together or we're going to fall together. I do know that without the shedding of blood, there's no redemption. And I do know that the Lord appeared to me in a vision, and he told me that Emmett was not mine, that he belonged to him, and that God had chosen him for this particular mission.
Oh yeah, God is watching. Oh yeah, He is watching. Oh, God is watching.
Oh Lord, if I had the chance to be born again, and a choice of colors for my skin, knowing that it's twice as hard, yes it is, being black to win, I would still wanna be black again. I tell you that's small minds, and the way some treat me, hatred is a